Today we're going to focus on finding the greatest common factor of each pair of numbers. So as I look at this one, they're looking for specifically the greatest common factor. I notice it says factor, not factors. So they're looking for a single answer. So I don't need many more things. I just need to find the greatest of all the factors. So we're going to start with 40 and 75. There's a couple ways you can do greatest common factor. The first way I'm going to show is listing. I think it takes a little bit longer. It's not my favorite method, but it's a method where you can be pretty confident in your answer. So the first thing I'm going to do is list out all the factors of 40. And all the factors of 40 are 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, 5 and 8. And if I try all the factors of 75, I can list out 1 and 75, 3 and 25, and 5 and 15. Now, they have multiple factors in common. They have they share 1, they share 5, but the greatest of all these common factors, the biggest one, ends up being obviously 5. Greatest common factor is 5. This isn't necessarily a method that I would use, however. What I would probably use is one that we talked about in class called the cake method. And the cake method, I think, makes the most sense because since factoring is really just division anyway, I'll set it up like a division problem. So if I set up a division problem and I'm trying to see how I can divide 40 and how I can divide 75 at the same time under the same division problem, I have to go through some numbers, mainly prime numbers, and figure out what is it that they have in common. So I'll look at 40 and 75 and I'll think, well, does 2 go into them? No, because only 40's even. 3 doesn't go into both of them because 3 will go into 75 but not 40. Let me try 5. And 5 does go into both. It gives me 8. And if 5 divides into 75, it gives me 15. And I'm going to take a real quick look here at both 8 and 15 and think, do these two have anything in common? I don't think so. So what I'm finding here very quickly is that my greatest common factor is simply this number. It's 5. I like it better because you don't have to do as much listing, and it gets right to the idea of a factor. If I look at the next one, 48 and 64, I'm going to jump right into the cake method because I would rather focus directly on the factor, what goes in. So let me check 48 and 64. As I think about these, I'll think, what is the smallest prime number that they can both be divided by? What factors out of both of them? Well, I know they're both divisible by 2 because 48 divided by 2 is 24, and 64 divided by 2 is 32. Then I'll look at these next two numbers and say, can they be divided by anything? And since they're both even, I know they can both be divided by 2 because I've got 12 here and 16 here. And these two can also be divided by 2 because I've got 6 here and 8 here. And these two can also be divided by 2. It leaves me with 3 here and 4 here. And then I'll look at 3 and 4 and I'll think, they really don't have anything in common. So the factors that go into all of them are 2's and 2's and 2's and 2's. And if I multiply all these factors, 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16, I now know that their greatest common factor is a 2 and another 2 and another 2 and another 2, which is 16. I would get the exact same thing by listing, except I think this is a faster method that really focuses on division. Let's have you try 18 and 42. You can pause the video here and then I'll go over the answer. Give it a try. Okay, so as we look at 18 and 42, I'm going to go right to the cake method. And I'm going to put these two numbers into a division style problem. And I'll think, what do they have in common? Well, obviously they're both even, so I can divide them both by 2. That leaves me with 9 here and 21 here. And then I'll focus on 9 and 21. And clearly, 2 doesn't go into them. Neither one of them are an even. But I think 3 goes into them because they're both divisible by 3. So if I divide them both by 3, I get 3 and 7. And then I'll look at what remains here. 3 and 7. I don't think anything divides into 3 and 7. So, I know a couple things. I know that 3 divides into them and 2 divides into them, but the biggest number that divides into them is 6. So their greatest common factor is 6.